The name Vlad III Dracula, or Vlad the Impaler, is synonymous with absolute, terrifying cruelty and blood. History records him as the inspiration for the world's most famous vampire, a figure whose deeds were so horrific that they shook 15th century Europe. The terrifying truth is that Vlad was not a fictional monster. He was a political tyrant who perfected sadism as a tool of statecraft. His reign of terror in Wallachia was defined by one terrifying ritual that he inflicted on his enemies and, chillingly, on his own guests. Don't you dare look away. Watch this entire deep dive documentary and subscribe to Crown of Dread, and you will learn the one shocking record that proves Vlad Dracula ordered the crucifixion of an entire town to secure his political power. The terror began not with the stake, but with a terrifying, absolute political mission to purge his own nobility. Vlad Dracula inherited a realm consumed by internal strife and betrayal. The powerful local nobility, the boyars, had a long history of assassinating or deposing rulers they disagreed with. Vlad's father, Vlad II Dracula, was assassinated, and his older brother was buried alive. Vlad returned from exile with one absolute, ruthless goal: to purge the nobility and establish unchallengeable totalitarian rule. His revenge was swift, calculated, and terrifyingly public. This was not random murder. It was a cold, systemic annihilation of the political opposition. The sheer brutality of his methods was designed to paralyze all future opposition and ensure that the boyars would never again dare to challenge the power of the throne. This demonstrates the historical necessity of systemic violence. Vlad showed that when a ruler faces entrenched opposition, cruelty becomes the quickest and most effective political tool for consolidation. The most infamous ritual of terror Vlad invented was impalement. This method, rarely used in Europe with such systematic scale, was chosen because it inflicted the most prolonged, visible, and agonizing suffering. The execution involved driving a thick, wooden stake vertically through the victim's body, carefully avoiding vital organs to ensure the victim remained alive and conscious for hours, sometimes days. The stakes were often blunted to prevent a quick death. This ritual maximized the agony, ensuring the victim died slowly from exposure, internal rupture, and the crushing weight of their own body. This terrifying act of methodical torture ensured that the execution was not just death, but a prolonged, horrifying public spectacle. This horrifying practice illustrates the absolute historical perfection of torture. Vlad showed that cruelty can be refined into a precise science, ensuring maximum psychological and physical agony to strike absolute fear into the population. That Vlad's cruelty was not just political, it was profoundly psychological. His terrifying ritual, known as the Impaler's Feast, stands as the ultimate symbol of his sadistic mind. After a successful military campaign or a political purge, Vlad would host a lavish, public banquet in a courtyard or field. The most horrifying detail is that the banquet was set up within sight, sometimes directly surrounded by hundreds of his impaled and dying victims. Vlad and his loyal guests would dine calmly, enjoying the finest food and wine, while the agonizing screams of the dying provided the background noise. On one infamous occasion, a courtier complained about the unbearable stench of the decaying bodies. Vlad immediately ordered that the complaining courtier be impaled on a taller stake than the others, simply to raise him above the smell. This grotesque psychological torment was a demonstration of absolute power. The terrifying act of public execution was a profound political statement. Vlad's systematic use of impalement served as a constant, overwhelming warning to his own populace, his neighboring rulers, and most immediately, his remaining boyars. The sprawling forests of impaled victims surrounding his capital and his military camps were visible for miles. This spectacle eliminated the need for complex laws or constant policing. The fear of the stake was the only law that needed to be enforced. Foreign envoys and visitors were forced to witness these horrifying scenes, guaranteeing that the image of Vlad's unchallengeable tyranny was spread across Europe. This demonstrates the historical function of terror as state propaganda. Vlad showed that massive, visible atrocities are the quickest way to enforce absolute compliance and project a terrifying image of power globally. Vlad's obsession with impalement transcended mere punishment. It became a chilling form of national and political theater, a terrifying statement on his absolute control over life and death in Wallachia. The act of impalement was slow, agonizing, and uniquely public. The executioners became artists of cruelty, meticulously preparing the stake by rounding the tip and oiling it, ensuring it would pierce the body without immediately killing the victim. The technique was refined to ensure the stake would emerge near the shoulder, avoiding vital organs, condemning the victim to a prolonged death that could last days. This slow, agonizing spectacle was a conscious decision by Vlad to maximize the public's terror. This horrifying practice illustrates the ultimate historical perfection of torture. Vlad showed that cruelty can be refined into a precise science, ensuring maximum psychological and physical agony to strike absolute fear into the population. The fear of this slow, crushing death was the only law that truly governed the peasants and boyars alike. The sight of the impaled victims surrounding the major cities and along the trade routes served as permanent, horrifying billboards advertising Vlad's unchallengeable power. The constant presence of death meant that every citizen lived in perpetual, paralyzing fear of the smallest transgression. The sheer scale of Vlad's brutality against his own boyars was not just about revenge. It was an act of cold, brilliant statecraft designed to eliminate all political opposition in a single, terrifying purge. One of the most infamous massacres involved a purge of the powerful boyar families of Targovist. Vlad, tired of their constant betrayals and political maneuvering, invited hundreds of them to an Easter feast. Upon their arrival, he accused the elderly boyars of treason and immediately had them executed by impalement. The youngest and strongest members of the families were subjected to a different, horrifying sentence. They were forced to march for over 100 miles to the site of an old, ruined fortress on the Argesh River. They were then forced into brutal, prolonged labor, rebuilding the fortress with their bare hands, many dying from exhaustion and exposure. This forced labor served as both punishment and infrastructure development, a terrifying efficiency of cruelty. This purge demonstrated that Vlad's political genius lay in his ability to combine terror with practical necessity. He eliminated his rivals and secured a vital strategic fortress in a single, devastating act of vengeance. The memory of the boyar screams during the execution and the subsequent forced march served as a permanent deterrent to any future thoughts of betrayal. Vlad's use of impalement was highly varied, adapted to maximize the victim's specific suffering. The stakes themselves were customized. Some were blunted to ensure a slower, more agonizing penetration, while others were sharpened. The height of the stake often reflected the rank of the victim, with high-ranking nobles placed on the tallest stakes to maximize their public humiliation and visibility. He reportedly ordered victims to be arranged in intricate geometric patterns around his banquet table or his military camps, turning mass execution into a terrifying form of macabre artistry. This calculated variety of torture ensured that everyone, regardless of rank, understood that their agony was meticulously managed by the prince's will. This terrifying method underscores the fact that the cruelty was deliberate, serving a purpose far beyond mere revenge. It was an elaborate, terrifying performance aimed at breaking the psychological will of the entire nation. The fear became pervasive, an atmosphere of dread that saturated every aspect of life in Wallachia. The Impaler's psychological terror was famously directed at foreign envoys, serving as a chilling diplomatic strategy. The Turks, the Hungarians, and the Saxons all sent ambassadors to Vlad's court, often seeking to negotiate peace or trade agreements. Vlad used these visits as opportunities for terrifying demonstrations of his power. On one notorious occasion, Turkish envoys refused to remove their turbans in Vlad's presence, citing their religious custom. Vlad, viewing this as a profound act of disrespect and political defiance, immediately ordered that their turbans be permanently nailed to their heads. This brutal, absurd act ensured that future envoys would show absolute, terrifying deference, proving that disrespect for the prince was equivalent to a death sentence. This incident was quickly reported across Europe and the Ottoman Empire, cementing Vlad's reputation as an unpredictable and monstrous tyrant whose personal pride transcended all diplomatic norms. This demonstrates the historical use of targeted, shocking violence as a diplomatic tool. Vlad showed that the fastest way to secure compliance is through the absolute annihilation of the enemy's personal dignity. The tragic fate of the Saxon merchants provided a clear financial motive for Vlad's systemic cruelty. The Saxon towns, often enjoying special privileges and economic autonomy, were seen by Vlad as a financial and political obstacle to his absolute control over trade routes. Vlad launched terrifying raids on the Saxon towns, capturing thousands of people and immediately executing them by mass impalement. This mass murder served to destroy the economic autonomy of the merchants and seize their vast wealth. The surviving Saxons were left politically and economically crippled, ensuring they would never again challenge the prince's financial decrees. The forests of impaled victims surrounding the towns were a horrific, permanent monument to the cost of free trade. The sheer scale of the atrocity was driven by a cold, calculating desire to consolidate financial power. The confiscation of wealth, combined with the removal of political rivals, was the engine of his early consolidation of power. This brutal economic policy highlights the fact that Vlad's cruelty was often driven by cold, financial calculations, not just simple bloodlust. The pervasive, agonizing fear created by Vlad's tyranny extended to his own personal security. Vlad himself lived in constant fear of assassination, knowing that his methods had generated a vast network of internal enemies. He reportedly relied heavily on personal bodyguards and enforced bizarre rituals around his meals, demanding that every piece of food and every cup of wine be tasted multiple times by different officials. His paranoia was so intense that he often trusted no one, changing his personal guards frequently and maintaining a distance even from his most loyal commanders. This constant vigilance and isolation reveal the profound psychological cost of his tyranny. Vlad was the absolute ruler, but he was also a man trapped by the terror he had created. His psychological burden was immense, turning his court into a place of continuous, low-level panic. The irony was palpable. The man who inflicted maximum terror was himself consumed by absolute fear. The darkest secrets of Vlad's personal life reveal a profound psychological disturbance that extended beyond his political enemies. Vlad reportedly ordered the execution of poor and sick people, believing that their existence was a burden on the state and that their elimination would purify his realm. On one chilling occasion, he invited the poor and infirm of Targovus to a grand feast, promising them a final, magnificent celebration. After the feast, he locked the doors of the hall and burned them all alive. This act of profound, arbitrary social cruelty was designed to create a sense of absolute fear, that no one, not even the most humble citizens, was safe from the prince's arbitrary, terrifying judgment. This horrifying social policy demonstrates the historical brutality of eugenics and social cleansing. Vlad showed that tyranny often seeks to control and eliminate the weak and vulnerable, viewing them as disposable obstacles to the perfect state. Vlad's obsession with absolute truth and honesty was itself a source of extreme, terrifying cruelty. He reportedly valued honesty above all else, and any person caught in a lie, regardless of the severity of the lie, was subjected to immediate, often fatal, punishment. He enforced this bizarre sense of morality with the same ruthless zeal as he enforced his political control. This meant that Wallachia was ruled by a climate of profound, agonizing honesty, where every citizen lived in fear of misspeaking or making a mistake that could be interpreted as deceit. This terrifying enforcement of rigid, absolute morality created a society paralyzed by fear. The fear of the lie became as potent as the fear of the stake itself, forcing the populace into a state of terrified, absolute obedience. This illustrates the historical danger of tyrannical morality. When a ruler imposes a personalized, rigid moral code with absolute power, the result is societal paralysis and pervasive terror. The profound historical question remains: was Vlad's cruelty merely political necessity, or was it rooted in a deep, clinical sadism? The sheer variety and inventive nature of his tortures, impalement, nailing hats to heads, burning the poor, suggests a personal, profound enjoyment of inflicting pain. He reportedly enjoyed dining among his dying victims, calmly dipping his bread in the blood and gore that stained his table, an act that transcended mere political signaling. This unique, grotesque ritual suggests a psychological profile of genuine sadism, a personal pleasure derived from witnessing and prolonging human suffering. The prince's cruelty was a terrifying blend of political calculation and deep-seated personal pathology. This horrifying personal detail underscores the fact that the boundary between statecraft and madness was often blurred in Vlad's Wallachia. His table became the ultimate stage for his private pathology, a horrific public display of his terrifying internal world. The ultimate, terrifying secret of Vlad's legacy is the impact his reign of terror had on the psychological profile of the region. The fear he instilled survived his death, etched into the cultural memory of Wallachia and Transylvania for centuries. The memory of the forests of the impaled ensured that no future ruler would ever command the same level of terror and unchallengeable obedience. His name, transformed into Dracula, became the ultimate symbol of blood, darkness, and tyranny. His legacy is one of absolute psychological domination, proving that the most effective cruelty survives physical death, haunting the land long after the tyrant is gone. Vlad's final act of political consolidation was the annihilation of the old capital and the creation of a new, impregnable fortress, a monument to his absolute and unchallengeable power. The original capital of Wallachia, Targovist, was stained by the blood of his father and brother, and Vlad sought a capital that would be defined only by his terror. He forced the surviving boyars, the very men who had betrayed his family, to engage in brutal, forced labor, transporting massive stone blocks for miles to rebuild his personal fortress, Poenary Citadel. Many died during this grueling process, which served as a continuous, public punishment for their past treason. This project was a symbolic statement. The physical construction of his new power was literally built upon the sweat, tears, and suffering of his former enemies. The citadel became a terrifying symbol of his enduring vigilance, watching over the land that he had so brutally pacified. This demonstrates the historical use of forced labor as political punishment. Vlad showed that infrastructure development can be a tool of systemic cruelty, making his enemies' suffering contribute directly to his power. The ultimate price of Vlad's relentless cruelty was his own profound isolation and the destruction of any genuine political alliance. While his acts of terror secured internal obedience, they alienated every powerful neighbor: Hungary, the Saxons, and most critically, the Ottoman Empire. His cruelty made him an unpredictable, dangerous figure who could not be trusted, even by his allies. The Hungarian king Matthias Corvinus, initially Vlad's strongest ally, eventually grew weary of Vlad's unpredictable brutality and the constant political chaos he generated. Corvinus imprisoned Vlad under dubious charges, effectively removing the tyrant from power for years. This betrayal by his supposed ally was the final, devastating payment for Vlad's excessive cruelty. His terror had made him too unstable, too dangerous, and ultimately expendable on the European political stage. This illustrates the historical danger of excessive cruelty. Vlad showed that tyranny that exceeds strategic necessity ultimately isolates the ruler, leading to betrayal by even his closest supporters. The circumstances of Vlad's final death remain one of the most intriguing and darkly satisfying secrets of his legacy, shrouded in intentional ambiguity and rumor. After his release from Hungarian prison, Vlad briefly reclaimed his throne, only to be killed shortly thereafter in a minor skirmish in 1476. The official accounts vary wildly. Some claim he was killed by the Turks, while others suggest he was killed by his own Wallachian soldiers, who mistook him for the enemy during the confusion of battle. This ambiguity surrounding his death is the final, chilling irony of his life. The man who meticulously controlled the agonizing death of thousands ultimately met a chaotic, anonymous, and inglorious end in the fog of war. This chaotic death was the antithesis of the precise, ritualistic executions he had inflicted on his rivals. This event demonstrates the powerful historical function of ambiguity. Vlad's death proved that rulers who live by chaos often die by it, denied the controlled, glorious end they sought to command. The macabre, final fate of Vlad's body was a direct consequence of the terror he had inflicted. The Ottoman Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror, upon receiving news of Vlad's death, ordered that Vlad's head be severed and publicly displayed on a spike in Constantinople. This horrifying public spectacle was the ultimate act of psychological warfare against the populace of Wallachia, confirming the tyrant's demise and reassuring the Turks of their victory. The body, devoid of its terrifying head, was hastily buried in a secluded monastery, its location deliberately obscured by the few remaining loyalists. This final desecration and concealment ensured that Vlad's physical remains were subjected to the same political violence he had imposed on his enemies. This illustrates the historical reality of posthumous vengeance. The tyrant's body, even in death, remains a potent political symbol, and its desecration is a necessary act of political control and public relief. The dark legacy of Vlad III Dracula is not merely the mass murder he committed, but the profound, enduring psychological impact he left on the historical record. His reign of terror was brief, but its memory was so potent that it transformed him from a minor Eastern European prince into the central icon of Gothic horror. His meticulous documentation of his crimes, preserved in the chilling German and Russian pamphlets of the 15th century, ensured that his brutality would be amplified and preserved for centuries. His cruelty became a terrifying form of immortality. This horrifying chronicle served as a moral warning and a form of dark entertainment, cementing his transformation into the mythological figure of Dracula. The fear he instilled transcended his physical death, haunting the cultural landscape of Europe forever. The stories of the impaled victims and the bloody banquets became the final, chilling testament to the terrifying political power of pure sadism. We have revealed the entire, horrifying truth. But now, we turn the final question to you, the crown of dread audience. Vlad III Dracula, facing constant political assassination from his boyars, used mass impalement and psychological terror to consolidate power and bring brutal stability to Wallachia. Do you believe that the political goal of securing the state and ending internal chaos morally justifies the commission of such systematic, unparalleled, sadistic cruelty on his own people? Let the world know your verdict. Drop your opinion in the comments below. Subscribe to Crown of Dread for more hidden history, and find the truth buried beneath the oldest thrones.